Morning. Well, I'm here with Dr Jennifer Stewart, and today we're talking about body condition scoring in horses.
When we look at horses every day and we see them day in, day out, it's very hard to know whether the horse is in the ideal body condition for it. And it's really important to know what condition score it is, because it affects the health of the animal. It's not just how they look on the outside, it's what's happening on the inside. And so when you see a horse every day, it's very difficult to tell. In fact, when they got vets and experienced horse people to estimate body weight of horses, they were often out by 50, 80 kilos. So these were even experienced people. So it's very important to be able to have a system that allows us to monitor whether there's been a change in body condition, because sometimes we don't notice it until it's been quite a huge change. And it's important that we can get onto these things early, firstly to keep the horse in really good health, but secondly so we can intuit almost whether there's something going on with the horse. So as most of us don't have a set of scales for a horse, and it's very hard to get them on your kitchen or your bathroom scales, there's been various systems devised to enable owners and vets and horse people to work out a horse's body weight. And there's a system that was developed in America, and it was firstly developed for quarter horse mares to determine how fat they were getting. And that's called the body condition score. The body condition score goes from 1 being too thin to 9 being too fat. So it's quite an easy system to use, and it's really important to use, and I'll go into those reasons. If a horse is too thin, it's not just too thin on the outside. It means the bone density is lower, the muscle mass is lower. And when we look at body weight and the condition of a horse, it's not just fat, it's a mixture of muscle and fat. So it's important to know that if a horse is too thin, it probably hasn't got enough muscle. Even its internal organs will be lighter than they should be. So being too thin is not good. On the other hand, being too fat is not good either, because fat insulates horses very well so that they can't lose body heat. Their exercise tolerance is reduced. There's more load on their joints, more work for their heart. So even though they might look cute and round like a little Thelwell drawing, it's actually very bad for them, for their health. So being too fat has a lot more problems than we think. It looks cute, they look nice, they're round, and we think they're well, but often they're not well. And the thing to remember about ponies is, even though you look in books and you see Shetland ponies and you're out riding and you see Welsh mountain ponies or New Forest ponies, there's really only two types of ponies in the world. There's ponies that have foundered, and there's ponies that are going to founder. And the reason for this is that they've evolved for 50 million years. And the ponies evolved in the cold regions of the northern hemisphere. There was ice and snow, and they had to forage and dig down deep to find a few blades of grass. So they evolved to store their body fat to get through those cold times, to get through the times when there wasn't much food. So they've been selected genetically to lay down fat. When we look at the Arabs and thoroughbreds, they evolved in North Africa. It wasn't cold, it was hot, so they have thinner skin. They don't store fat because fat reduces the ability to lose body heat, because the ponies wanted to hang on to it. So we have these ponies that have evolved in these cold, harsh conditions, and we bring them to Australia and we feed them. So we're actually working against their evolution, and we never give them the famine when they're going to lose that body weight. And fat is actually not just insulation, it's actually a very active organ. It's almost seen as a hormone producing organ, because it produces a lot of inflammatory things, which is one of the reasons that ponies that have got too much condition will founder. And even if you don't know they're foundering, you can't see it, there's often little changes going on in the feet which are going to cause the horse discomfort and reduce its working life, and also make its older age a lot less pleasant. And one of the big things about being too heavy is that the ability to exercise or exercise tolerance is reduced. So it's harder work for the heart. There's hundreds of kilometres of extra blood vessels supplying all that fat that the heart's got to pump through. So if the horses at Pony Club pony club once a month, an inter-club day once a month, and ridden a couple of times a week, it's a big stress on the system to carry that extra weight. And in hot conditions, they can overheat, their respiratory rate's elevated, and it does cause them a lot of distress. The other reason it's good to body condition score, as well as determining the fat, if you're going to be riding the horse, you actually want working muscle, not fat. So the amount of fat the horse is carrying is, probably like carrying an extra rider or two on its back at the same time. The other thing it's useful for is if you're worming the horse. You can get a pretty good accurate idea of the body weight, and so it allows you to be more economical and more precise with things like administering how much worming paste. The other thing is, if you want to breed the horse, if the mare's too fat, they actually don't ovulate as often and they're harder to get in foal, and that can be heartbreaking. And also you only have a certain number of months to get them in foal, and if anything goes wrong and they're ovulating and harder to get in foal, you can lose a year or so with that. So how do we start to make condition scoring just part of our daily life? How do we make it become something we automatically mentally do when we look at a horse? Well, there's several areas to look at. There's the neck, there's the withers, the shoulder, the ribs, the loin and the rump. And they're the areas where the horse lays down fat. So by looking at those areas, firstly the rump, we can tell whether the horse is starting to gain weight, because we want to have our horses in an ideal body condition score for them, for their health, for their exercise, and so we're not wasting money on feed. In fact, talking about feed, most horses need, if they're not doing a lot of work, 1.5% to 2% of their body weight in feed a day. A lactating mare will need 3%, but 1.5% to 2% of their ideal body condition score and the correlated weight. So we don't want to be wasting money on feed. Firstly, it's expensive, and also there's no point in wasting it. So it's useful from that point of view. So when we look at the horse, we'll notice the rump starting to get round. Now, 0.5 centimetre increase in fat there is equal to 1 body condition score on our scale of 1 to 9. So if we start to see if a horse is getting overfed or too much feed for the amount of work it's doing, first place to look is you'll see it on the rump. From there the horse will put weight on over the loins, then the ribs, the shoulders, the withers and the neck. So it's a good idea to have a mental picture of what your horse should be. And also, as I said, if you're seeing the horse every day, you won't notice slight changes, especially in winter if they've got a rug on, or in summer if they've got a rug on for the flies and the sun, or if they've got a good big winter coat. It can be hard to pick up any changes. So it's a useful tool to start using and to increase when you're looking at your horse, to just mentally note the body condition score, because changes in weight will first come across the rump, then the loins, and for some horses that are too light, that may be desirable. But for most of horses, as I said, in our lovely abundant conditions here in Australia, our problem is that they're going to put on too much weight. So let's have a look at our system. We're using 1 to 9. 1, I think all of us will have no trouble with. The horse is bony. There's bones everywhere, and that's a pretty easy one to tell the horse is too thin. As we move from 1, the horse is laying down muscle, it's laying down a bit of fat, and we get to our ideal score, which is around 4. And that's a nice horse. It's got a nice bit of cover on it, but it's still got muscle definition. It's not just a marshmallowy blob of fat. So 4 is the ideal for us, 4 to 5. So when we look at a horse on a condition score of 4, they're very pleasing to look at. They don't look overweight, and they also usually stand well, they have a good mental attitude, they're not having to deal with excess body condition. So 4, the horse will have a nice neck, will have a little bit of fat cover over the rump, a little bit over the loins, not too much over the ribs, but often it's good when you stand at an angle that you can just see the last 1 or 2 floating ribs. Sometimes we want to cover those over, especially if we're showing the horse, but once they start accumulating fat over the shoulders, the withers and the neck, they're getting into an unhealthy body condition score. If we're looking at a horse with a condition score of around 4 to 5, which is ideally where we want them, You'll also notice not only is the horse very pleasing to look at, but they'll often have a better temperament, better attitude, and you can just tell that they're enjoying being alive and they're happy in their body. As they start to increase in body condition score, and as I said, 0.5 centimetre of fat over the rump and the tail head equals 1 body condition score. And the fat is laid down in a certain pattern. It starts at the rump, moves across the loins, over the ribs, into the shoulders, the withers and the neck. So the body condition scoring system is really useful for getting a handle on how much feed you should be giving the horse. And that's good for your pocket and the horse's health if you don't overdo it. Well, generally the horses will need about 1.5 to 2% of their body weight in feed, and that allows you to work out how many kilograms of feed the horse should be giving a day. If the horse is on pasture, then you may need to regulate pasture intake. But from a hand feeding and a hard feed point of view, go for about 1.5 to 2% of the ideal body weight. Now if your horse is too forward in condition and you want to drop a bit of that body fat away, use the same principles that we use on ourselves. You feed them about 70% of what their ideal weight would require. So you can drop the feed intake by a couple of kilos a day for a big horse. And there's one really important thing is though that the horse should never ever be starved, especially ponies, because it can lead to life-threatening liver problems. So if we're looking at ponies and we want them to lose weight, we just reduce the richness of the feed, and there's nothing wrong with good quality grass hay, and that can be soaked to take the sugar out, but that never ever should the horse be starved. And a sign that it's not getting enough fibre, which means it's getting an acid stomach, and you could be facing problems with the liver if it's losing weight too quickly, is that the horse may start to chew wood, and that's a classic sign that the horse is not getting enough fibre, and so there's acid in its guts are building up. It can be prone to stomach ulcers. The large intestine can get too acid, and that then damages the whole flora of the intestinal tract. So never ever should the horse be starved. Never drop below about 60% of what the ideal weight would require. So let's say we've got a horse that needs, let's say, 350 kilos. It's going to need about 6 to 7 kilos of feed a day if you're hand feeding it. And that should be made up of over 80% or even 100% can be a good quality roughage, because the horse has evolved on roughage, and so they can synthesize most of the things they need. They've got a very efficient gastrointestinal tract. So always go for work out how many kilos, 1.5 to 2% of their body weight a day, and to lose weight, drop that down to 65 or 70%, but never below that. Now if we've got a horse that's too light, or let's say we've reduced its body condition score, when horses lose weight, just the same as us or a dog or any other species, they'll lose muscle as well as fat. So if we've got a horse that for some reason it's been unwell, or it's had dental problems, or for some reason it's lost a lot of weight, we might want to increase the body condition. So we're talking muscle and fat. We work out what the ideal body weight, body condition score is we want. So let's say we've got a horse that's a 3 and we want to get it to a 5. So we work out what would that horse need on a condition score of 5. And there's lots of tables that will show you what that body weight will be for that horse at a body condition score of 5. So we work out what the horse would be eating if it was at its ideal weight, and gradually we increase what the horse has up to that amount, and you'll see the body condition score will start to change. Firstly the rump, then we go across the loins, and then across the ribs, the shoulder, the withers and the neck, and you allow a couple of months for that to take place, because the horse is not just building on the outside, if you remember, it's building the internal organs, it's building robust strength into its bones, its red cells and its muscles. So allow some time and a bit of patience, but using the body condition score, you'll get a lot of confidence, and you will also have the ability to fine-tune and micromanage a little bit the steps of weight gain and weight loss to achieve what's ideal for your horse.
you.